This is the Atari 8-bit podcast.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Paul Wehner created one program for the Atari 8-bit computer, Saratoga, which was published by Atari Program Exchange. The American Revolutionary War game first appeared in the fall 1983 APX catalog, where it won second prize in the entertainment category. I will read its entry in that catalog to you. Saratoga by Paul Wehner, recommended for ages 13 and up, written in machine language. Revolutionary War strategic board game. The year is 1777. The American revolutionaries are waging a hopeless war against the Redcoats and Hessians of the British Empire. General Washington trusts you to foil the three-pronged attack from British commanders Burgoyne, St. Leger, and Howe. Your men are weary, but there's no time to spare. The strategic target of Albany, New York, must be defended at all costs. Suddenly, the Redcoats are spotted marching up from New York City. The time has come, and you swing your troops toward the approaching force. You play on a large map of the East Coast from Maine to Philadelphia and some inland area. You command the American forces trying to destroy all the British forces by the end of the year, or to keep control of the strategic sites of Albany, Philadelphia, West Point, and Fort Ticonderoga. To do this, you're equipped with the American Revolutionary Army and local militia. Facing you are the British, consisting of Redcoats and Hessian mercenaries, led by the computer. The troops are represented on the map by square markers controlled by the joystick. The markers' travel, with a maximum of 8 moves per turn, is affected by mountains and rivers. When two opposing counters are adjacent to each other, combat begins. The computer calculates the combat odds, taking into account muster, terrain, and direction. There are 8 different scenarios to choose from, and all the games can be saved to a diskette or cassette. The author invites written comments and questions. Review comments. Eastern Front buffs will enjoy this war simulation of the American Revolution. The game takes a couple hours to complete, but it's interesting and challenging. Requires one Atari joystick controller. Order information. It was available on cassette or diskette. Either way, it required 32K of RAM and cost $24.95. It was APX catalog number 20228. This interview took place on October 24th, 2017.
I went to graduate school. I'm a physical chemist. And I did some programming in Fortran in graduate school and actually in my job. And the Atari was the first personal computer that I bought. Of course, there weren't very many out then either.
Sure.
Let's see what else. My programming experience was all in Fortran. Nothing else. It was Fortran doing calculations. And I worked for a chemical company. And I was married, and I had one daughter at that time. Maybe two daughters at that time.
All right, so
that's good.
So you're doing Fortran on a mainframe, I assume, or something at school, and
a CDC 7600 and a 6600.
Yeah. All right, and you decided.
Controlled it. I don't know if you're familiar with those or not.
A little bit. I mean, I've heard of them.
Yeah.
So you decided to get a personal computer, and you chose the Atari. Any particular reason?
Well, I had their 2600, their game box, and I thought that was good. And the 800 looked like a good computer, so I got it just so I could play with it and learn some machine code.
Cool. Yeah. So your game you did in assembly language. Yeah. So you obviously went from Fortran to teaching yourself 6502 assembly.
Yes.
Any story there?
Yeah, well, but I've got many instructions in a 6502, you know.
Yeah.
Well, you may have never programmed in 6502, but there aren't very many instructions in it. And, you know, you had all the 48K of memory.
Sure. You don't need all that memory. It's way too much.
No.
All right, so why? So as far as I could tell, you published only this one game. Did you do any other projects beforehand, or did you just jump straight into this?
no, oh no, this is the only game I ever wrote. Was this one on the Atari? I did a lot of programming at work in Fortran, in Pascal, and C, and that kind of stuff. But they were all programs for work-related programs.
Mm-hmm. So,
but I was interested. I liked war games as a kid. I liked Eastern Front, and so I decided to try my hand at writing one.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to learn all about player missile graphics. They all sounded great.
So why the Revolutionary War?
It's one I remembered from childhood, I think.
Uh-huh.
And the World War II was already taken with the Eastern Front.
Sure. So I'm not much of a war gamer. I certainly looked at Saratoga and played with it a little bit. But it struck me that this game came a couple of years after Eastern Front, and it seems like it's almost taken from the same cloth. The iconography is the same. Did you use the source code, or where did?
No. It's all original. I wrote it all from scratch.
Uh-huh.
No, it was probably about a year after Eastern Front, because I only had the Atari for about a year and a half. And no, I liked the way I played Eastern Front a lot, and I liked the way it interacted and the way you moved things. So I just took all the look and feel and used it in mine.
Cool.
It's all character graphics. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was all character graphics. They're all 8-bit characters.
Right.
And the screen is just scrolled by moving characters around.
So you kind of reverse engineered the look and feel of
no, actually, I just looked at it and I decided I was going to write one like it.
Uh-huh.
I didn't look at his code. I mean, he published his code soon after I wrote mine, but it was pretty obvious how to do things.
Sure. Yeah. So,
you only ran at 1 megahertz. You didn't have a whole lot of memory, and so if you wanted a big map, you had to do it in their character graphics, and they told you how their little chips worked. Antic, God, I don't remember the name of the chips anymore, but they had one for sound, they had one for graphics, and they had one for input-output or something. Player missile graphics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to create the game?
I'd say probably somewhere between 3 months and 6 months.
Mm-hmm. And was it your intention all along to offer it up to Atari Program Exchange?
Nope, it was my intention to write it, but then they came up with their Atari Program Exchange, so I'd send it in there.
Oh, nice.
I wrote it for the fun of it.
Uh-huh. And it won a prize, fall 1983, second prize, second prize in the entertainment category. So normally, what they did is they give you a stipend so you could get some more Atari equipment or software or something. Did you do that?
I think I got a printer out of it or something like that. I mean, if you want a money making deal, this is not the way to go. I think it only made $1,000 or something.
That was going to be my next question. It's like, did it sell very well?
You didn't make a lot of money out of it. You keep your day job.
Sure. Right.
It was a fun way to learn assembly code. Have you ever programmed in assembly code?
A little bit. I've done a couple of little games in assembly, but nothing quite as big as Saratoga.
Well, it only occupied 48K. It wasn't real big.
Nice.
And that's with graphics. I mean, what it did was it did all the thinking for the British in the vertical blank interrupt, if you were familiar with that. That was the time it took the beam to go from the bottom right corner of the television screen up to the top, and you had something like 1,000 machine cycles or something that you could use to do all your thinking. It taught you to be very tight on your code and very concise.
Mm-hmm. I bet. So did you? So the British the enemy movements. I got an email. This happened this morning. I got an email from a professor of informatics and artificial intelligence somewhere, and he was asking me about examples of artificial intelligence in these early games. And I was thinking, like, we didn't think of it as AI, but I guess it was. I mean, you're programming enemy movements, and they got to respond to
Right.
how the player acts.
Some kind of strategy that you were going to use.
Say that again?
Yeah, and you didn't have a whole lot of code to write it in. I mean, you weren't using neural nets.
No.
That was a problem I had as a kid, because you always wanted to play games, but you could. They mostly were two-player games, and it's not fun to play against yourself.
Right.
So you'd play against a computer. Well, of course, with only so much space available, there were only certain things you could do with those, and I can't remember all the strategies that I put in there, but basically it kept track of where they were, where the enemy was, and if one of their, say from the British side, if a British unit was being under attack, I think I actually had it move toward that unit. If not, it knew which cities it had to control. And so what it did was they tried to stay near their cities unless they had to go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was a very simple strategy, but how you made up for it is you gave them twice as many units as the Americans, and so you always had a numerical advantage. Mm-hmm. Was it the same is true in Eastern Front? Uh-huh. I mean, his were fairly simple, and if you played real fast, you could overwhelm his routines, and that's how you could win that game.
Right. Well, that was going to be my next question. Is if a player played slowly, did it give your enemy more time to make good decisions?
It certainly did, because it refined its calculation every time it went through that vertical bank interrupt. It would refine where it wanted to go. It could look at more things.
That's super interesting.
Well, I did it that way because the whole time you're putting in your instructions, the cursor's on the screen, and so that way you didn't have any delay. I mean, if you were to click on it, move the little cursor around, it would move in real time for you, and all this thinking was done when there was nothing on the screen.
Right. Cool. So did you ever think about doing other programs after this one? Or start on anything?
Actually, I've written several since that one, but my hobby happens to be astronomy, and so that's where I went with my programming. I went into image analysis and dealing with pictures, and enhancing pictures from astronomy and adding them together and doing all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
Fortunately, computers got a little more powerful by that point too.
Right. And what I meant was, did you write any other games or programs for the Atari?
I was not interested in writing any more games for the Atari. I had got what I wanted out of it. I learned the assembly code.
Yeah. Nice. Do you still have the source code by any chance?
I seriously doubt it, because it was probably on a 5 1/4-inch disc, and they don't even make those anymore.
Right. Well, if you find it either on disc or printout, I would love to be able to digitize that so people can learn from what you made a long time ago.
Yeah. I believe I threw all that out probably 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
The only thing I got anymore is the manual that went with it.
Cool. Nice. Cool. So, all right, what haven't I asked you about your time with the Atari that I should have?
I enjoyed the Atari. I thought it was a very good computer. I mean, I had the 800, not the 400. I would have gone on. I went on and bought their the ST that they had. Mm-hmm. But then they kind of floundered, and so I went into the IBM world.
Yeah, as did everyone else.
Yeah. Though, I mean, I thought the Atari had better graphics because of the way they handled it with their dedicated chips. And 48K was a lot of memory back then.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you got that on your watch.
Yeah. 48 meg on your watch, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, your phone's probably got 6 or 7 gigabytes on it.
Sure.
The problem with BASIC is it's slow.
Yeah.
You really can't do a whole lot of thinking in BASIC because it is so slow. I mean, if you wanted to do anything, you had to go to assembly code. That's why I went to assembly code. But the 6502 is not a bad place to learn assembly codes. The 256 instructions would be maximum, I think, but there weren't even that many. I mean, you only used 30 or 40 instructions, loads, adds, and rotate right, rotate left. It's been a while since I've done that, so I don't remember all the details.
Right. But you also had to interface with the Antic chip and get the timing right to get things on the screen. And
but they had very good documentation on how all those worked. I mean, that's one thing that you're missing nowadays, that nobody knows how any of it works anymore, and they don't even provide documentation on it. But back if you bought the Antique, they had some book, Day Ray Atari.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
That explained to you how each of those chips worked and how you could program each one of them, and it did a very good job of it.
Nice.
And so I had that. I obviously had that book.
Do you remember getting any feedback from the Atari Program Exchange people about things they wanted fixed in the game, or did they just accept it as you submitted it?
Actually, they accepted it just the way it was, and they sent it up to the guy who wrote Eastern Front, and he liked it too.
Nice. Chris Crawford. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, he worked at Atari, and
right.
They sent it up to Chris, and they sent me a note back and saying he thought it was a good game.
Well, that's high praise.
He probably didn't write his code the way I wrote mine, but
right.
There are many different ways to solve the same problem.
Sure, absolutely. There's a lot of ways to do it. Yeah. What do you do today?
I'm retired.
Okay. So
I'm a little older than you are. I'm 65.
Okay. So what do you do with your time as a retired person?
I do a lot of walking.
Cool.
But I still do my hobby of astronomy.
Mm-hmm.
I still write programs for astronomy. So it's all in Pascal now. It's in Delphi. If you're familiar with Delphi from Borland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great programming language. It would not do to write games in, though, because interfacing to the video is still slow. I mean, you still have to do that differently.
Yeah.
If you want real-time feedback like that. So the processors are much faster. Memory is much cheaper. But as I said, I got into programming in graduate school because I was doing dance structure calculations in Fortran. But the Atari just gave me a way to learn 6502, and I kind of enjoyed it. It was fun.
Excellent. Cool. All right, I think this is my last question. If you could send a message to the Atari 8-bit user community that still exists, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
I'd tell them to move on to the more high-powered computers. You can do a whole lot more with them.
All right, fair enough.
I mean, I like the 8-bit computer. You have nostalgia for it, but if you go back and play those games, they're slow and they're. I'd move on to the bigger computers, and most of them probably have, as far as programming goes.
Sure. Excellent. There's still something to be said for a game of Star Raiders.
I like Star Raiders, and that's an interesting game too. It's probably written I'm sure it's written using plain original graphics, and that it really wouldn't all be that hard to write.
Thank you, Paul. I have what I need.
Okay. I'll talk to you later.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, there are 2 ways you can help. You can help fund these interviews directly by contributing to my Patreon. A small monthly contribution will help offset the expenses of making these oral history interviews. contribute at patreon.com/savitz. Or make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.